We're going to start recording the progress. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Beatriz. I don't know. Behrmann, how does that sound?
Yeah, it's a mouthful. That's good. Yeah, Beatriz Nobua-Behrmann.
Nobua-Behrmann. I got that right. Yeah. I'm going to read you her whole title. Urban Forestry and Natural Resource Advisor, University of California Cooperative Extension, Los Angeles and Orange County. South Coast Research and Extension Center. So that's a mouthful. And she's been working out here in the canyons and with us on a lot of things. So I'm just going to turn it over to you. So go for it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for the introduction. Thanks everyone for being here. And I've been working in the canyons, but mostly Chris, who's also here, and Gabe, who are part of my team, have been doing most of the heavy lifting, which is, going with Mike to go check on the houses and actually doing the boots on the ground surveys. So they are the ones doing the heavy work, actually. All right. So Geoff asked me if I could give you guys a little presentation on GSOB, and then we can discuss what are the, what the problem is and what the options are there for management, and what else can we do as a community. So I'm gonna go ahead. I wanted to share my screen. Can you give me sharing permissions?
Yes, hold on a second. Okay, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, so I have a presentation for you guys, but feel free to sort of interrupt any moment if you have any questions. But I think hopefully I'll be able to cover most of the things, and then we can talk about the things that I did not cover and you're also interested in knowing. So let's go here. And nope, that is not the way. Sorry. Let's do this way. All right, there we go. Okay. So anyways, today I'm going to talk about the gold-spotted oak borer, or GSOB as we end up calling it because it's a long name. This is a beetle that is of the group of the jewel beetles, or the flathead borers. It's a very close relative to the emerald ash borer, which you might have heard of. They're actually the same genus and has a similar way of acting, except that the emerald ash borer acts on attacks ashes, and the gold-spotted oak borer attacks oaks. We don't have emerald ash borer in California yet, but we do have our GSOB over here. And it attacks preferentially 3 species of oaks, mostly the coast live oak and the California black oak, and a little bit less preferred is the canyon live oak. So over here in the canyons, where we have a lot of coast live oak and very big mature oaks, GSOB can have devastating consequences. So we gotta act as soon as possible. This is the current distribution in California. The GSOB is native actually to Southeast Arizona, and we believe it made it into California through the movement of infested firewood. In Arizona, is not an invasive species because of the climate and the species of oaks that are there. It doesn't cause as much damage as it does here in California. The infestation started in San Diego, and it took many years. We think it's been there since the 90s, but we didn't know until 2008 that GSOB was the cause of big oak mortality in San Diego County. And from there, also probably, and in some cases we know for sure that it was through firewood, it moved to different smaller focuses of infestation, including the new infestations that we've been finding in the canyons. And yes, it is new to us. We've been checking on the canyons regularly. We do have our reporting tool, and I did get some people thinking that maybe they had GSOB. We went there, we checked, and it was always a false alarm until now. One of the reasons that we're finding a lot more lately here in Orange County is because of my fantastic team that is super well trained, and we just have the opportunity to look for it, and now we're finding it. So it's probably in more places than we originally expected. This is the kind of mortality that you could see as a consequence of GSOB infestation in a forested area. So you can see all the dead oaks in this oak woodland. This is in San Diego, and close to Descanso and Watay. This is basically ground zero for the infestation in California. Is an area that got very heavily infested and very impacted by the GSOB infestation. And the way the life cycle of this pest works is we have the adults emerging out of the trees. The adults are about half an inch or a little bit less. They're brown or blackish with this nice golden dots on them. And it is very rare that you'll be able to see the adults. What you will see is the D-shaped exit holes that they leave on the bark of the tree when they emerge. So the emergence season goes through something like mid-May to September. The beetles will mate and lay their eggs on the bark. The eggs are teeny tiny, so you probably never see them, but they're there, and out of those eggs comes teeny tiny larvae that bore into the bark of the oaks. Those larvae start eating the cambium layer and the phloem, so all the tissue under the bark, and start growing. As they eat, they create all this damage in both the growing tissue of the tree and also the vascular tissue of the tree, right? So they keep growing, they get bigger and bigger. Then they overwinter as a pre-pupa, and they have this weird hairpin configuration that they call it. They just like fold in half and stay like that for the whole winter. And then when it starts being warm again, they pupate, and after a month or so, they come out as adults. So basically, we have one generation of GSOB per year. And this is important when you're thinking about when is better to survey and when it's better to treat, right? You want to treat when you know that the beetles are coming out, and then you can catch them. And it's good to survey, while the beetles are overwintering, and so you can do your treatments during the emergence season. For evidence of attack, the main evidence is this D-shaped exit holes. They're pretty small. They have the shape of a D, and if you think about it, it's because they are flat-headed. The top of their head is flat, but they still have a big belly, and so the flat head and the belly makes a D-shaped exit hole. And it's about, if you put a quarter next to it, is about the size of the letters of the word liberty in a quarter. That's a good way to check on that. And if we have any in-person meetings, we can also provide you with some other handouts and like ID cards that have an example of the D-shaped exit hole that you can use it for comparison. On top of those D-shaped exit holes, that's the main thing. There's other things that will give us a clue that maybe something is going on with that tree. Specifically, dieback is one of the main ones. So we start seeing dieback associated with the damage that the larvae is causing. When infestations are a little bit more, progressed a little bit more, you can have staining in the bark. And that's because as the larvae is sort of damaging the tissue, the vascular tissue of the tree, all the water that the tree is sucking up, it kind of stays there. It cannot go further up because the vascular tissue is compromised over there and accumulates in parts of the bark, and then you see this staining. But be careful, because staining can be caused by many other agents that are not GSOB. So basically, dieback, staining, and dieback as well. It could be drought that causes dieback, right? So dieback and staining, and even the woodpecker activity, which tends to be another thing that we can see when a tree is infested with GSOB, because the woodpeckers might eat the pupa. All of that is things that will tell us, okay, we need to go and check at that tree a little bit closer, and then see if we can find the D-shaped exit holes. That is our giveaway. And of course, the other thing, if you end up putting an axe or a chisel into the tree and you go under the bark in infested trees, you could see this feeding damage caused by the pupa under the bark. But that's not something we go around, hitting trees with an axe. And I wanted to show you this. These are the kind of symptoms you can find in coast Boeck. So one thing that is important in coast Boeck, especially, it attacks the trees that are on the bigger side. So trees that are more than 18 inches in diameter, that their trunk is more than 18 inches in diameter. And when they start attacking it, the tree might not show many symptoms. So the tree might look pretty good, their canopy pretty full. And as the infestation progresses, they start thinning, the canopy starts thinning. And you see, like in this other picture, there's like less leaves basically. And eventually you can even have full branches that might die. The problem right now with just basing it on this kind of symptoms is that the oaks in our canyons are right now pretty stressed by other agents, mainly the drought. And so they have been exposed to drought for a long time. So a lot of the oaks are showing dieback symptoms or crown thinning, and it's not necessarily related to GSOB. But if you see a tree that starts declining, it is a good idea to go check and see if you can see the D-shaped exit holes. Something important is the way that this beetle attack a tree. For reasons that we don't yet know, they tend to attack or prefer to attack a few of the trees in an area, either because the tree is better at hosting the beetles, or because they like to go where there's already someone else from their same species, but they tend to attack some of the trees a lot more heavily than others. And those are what we call brood trees or amplifier trees, right? So it's in an area, there's going to be a few trees, usually it's about 7 to 10% of the infested trees are heavily infested. And the rest are more like light to moderately infested. These brood trees, they have between 60 and 90% of the GSOB population in that area. So they concentrate most of the beetles and most of the larvae in a location. So those trees are the ones that we end up targeting for removal because we know that they are full of beetles. Usually once they are severely infested, the tree does not recover. And if we are able to remove a few of the infested trees, then we're giving the other trees a chance to fight it off and survive, because we're removing also most of the agent that causes the problem, most of the GSOB in the area. Once I wanted to show you this tree is a brood tree, and there is some dieback, there is some yellowing in the tree, in the branches, but it's not super, it's not super evident. But this tree had about 100 exit holes. Just to give you an idea, our cutout for a brood tree is 25 to 30 exit holes. So more than that, we usually consider that a brood tree. And when time passes, some of the trees succumb to it. And this tree over here had 1,000 exit holes. So if we let the trees get to that point, that means that this tree produced 1,000 beetles that did the thing to other trees in the area, right? So that's why we want to, we do tree removals as part of the management, but as selected tree removals of those that are brood trees. And talking about spread, there's some things that have been done, so you can just actually put the beetles in some sort of a mill. You paste them to this and you make them fly until they cannot take it anymore. And you can measure the stamina of the beetles and how far could they potentially fly on their own. And really, we found that this insect does not fly long distances on their own. And so we don't see long distance jumps due to natural dispersion. They usually come out of the tree and infect the trees that are, the next tree, the trees that are around those infested trees. But we do know that the movement of firewood is what accounts for long distance movement of these pests, and also helps spread infestations within an area, which makes it a lot harder to control. So really avoiding the movement of infested firewood is one of the main ways to prevent the spread of the pest. For GSOB management, as steps that we would like to have is, of course, always the prevention. We want to prevent the spread and prevent it from coming into our community if we don't have GSOB yet. But once we have it, we keep preventing it from spreading further from our community to the neighboring community. Then GSOB management should have some detection and monitoring, and part of that is what we are doing in the canyons with Mike's help and with Orange County Fire Authority's funds. Then the removing of the amplifier trees or the brood trees. And then we can manage the infested wood to make sure it doesn't spread to other locations, and we can protect the trees that are either have low levels of infestation or are not infested but high value trees that we want to keep them as safe as possible. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these. Regarding prevention, I'm going to say this over and over, is the movement of firewood is the main way it moves around. So really not just not moving firewood, but also avoid buying firewood that hasn't been seasoned or that hasn't been treated as in kiln dried. If the wood is chopped and just just sold, it could have larvae inside of them, and then it will hatch and infest your trees. And I'm going to talk about what you can do to manage the wood and make sure you don't spread the pest. For GSOB management, really removing brood trees is the main way. So there's trees that have more than 30 exit holes. These trees have the trees that I see here, every one of these toothpicks is put in one of the exit holes. So this is a great brood tree. And in the bark of those trees, there's still pupae and larvae that are developing. So when we remove these brood trees, now we have to make sure we do something with that wood, because the wood still has all this pupa and larvae in it. And to give you an idea, this small amount of bark that came from a brood tree yielded this amount of beetles. So that was 186 beetles that came out of that handful of bark. So as you can imagine, you really have to be very careful when you move firewood around, or you get firewood from an unknown source. So to make sure you're not moving this pest around, one thing you can do is just chip that wood. So if you're removing an amplifier tree or a branch of a infested tree, chipping or top grinding the wood is an easy way of not of killing all the beetles in it, as long as the chips are 3 inches or smaller than 3 inches. That should be okay. But if you want to use the wood as firewood, you need to first season the wood for at least 2 years. You could season the wood on just uncovered, but in that case, all the beetles are going to come out of the wood and go to the neighboring trees, which is not ideal. So to safely season the wood, you need to cover it either with a plastic tarp or a metallic mesh. And really, in these cases, you need to be super anal about it, because any little crack, the beetles are going to find it and come out of it. So basically, you're trapping the beetles inside the mesh or the tarp and preventing it from leaving, and the beetle dies out of starvation. The plastic tarp is not that recommended because it easily breaks. A dog jumps on it or a cone falls on it, and it gets brittle with the sun. So metallic mesh in that case is the best option. But another option is removing the bark. These beetles live in the bark. So if you debark the wood and then you can sell the hardwood as firewood, that is okay. It's not simple to debark wood. It takes some labor, but it can be done. And then once you have wood without bark, that wood cannot have GSOB in them. The GSOB is all in the bark. And so that wood can be used as firewood and sold and moved. The bark that came from that wood, though, that needs to be either chipped, you can bury it, you can burn it right away, but you gotta somehow make sure that all the beetles in that bark that you take out of the wood die. And then for treatments and protection of our trees, you have to think about that it only makes sense to treat a tree if it's within 5 miles of a known infestation. If it's is an oak from one of the susceptible species, and if it's an oak that is more than 8 inches in diameter, we have found that GSOB very rarely, almost never attacks trees that are smaller than 8 inches. And that is a tree that is healthy, right? It has a healthy crown, and then it has less than 25 GSOB emergence holes, which will make it qualify. If it has more than 25, it goes into the category of brood tree, and that tree should be removed. There's different options for treatments. There's trunk injections with insecticides. There's trunk sprays with insecticides. And those have to, which one you're going to use depends on many things, including where the tree is located, what is the budget that you have for that tree, how many trees are you going to be treating in an area, and among other things. So it's really best to get, not best, it's mandatory actually that you get an arborist to do that work. The kind of pesticides that are used for this pest are not the ones that you can buy at the store. So you have to have an applicator license in order to be able to even buy it and apply it correctly, so you don't cause any unintended damage. So really contracting a professional is the way to go for treatments. And regarding timing, you have to think about the life cycle of the beetles. And so we want, if we're going to be spraying the tree, what we do is we spray the trunk of the tree and the main branches. And that's a contact insecticide. So we're targeting the beetles when they're coming out and they chew on the bark to come out, then they die. Or a beetle that comes and tries to lay eggs in your tree. The beetle that lands on the bark that has the treatment with the insecticide, that beetle will die and the eggs will die as well. For the trunk injections, there's other risks to keep in mind. Like when you do a trunk injection, you're making a hole in the tree, drilling a hole in the tree, which can cause other pathogens to come into your tree. So there's some weighting of pros and cons, but generally those are a little bit more expensive, but at least you don't have the if you're like next to water where you cannot do trunk sprays, trunk injections are a good alternative. In that case, you want to do it in spring when the trees are starting to take water, they're starting to bud, there's new growth, and they're starting to take water more actively. So because you're expecting that the movement of water from just normal of the tree will also move the pesticide that you're injecting into it up towards the rest of the tree. So typically the best timing for doing the treatments is basically beginning of May. That will be the best moment to do this. And yes, so, we need to have, if you have GSOB, you need to, or if you don't, you still have to make sure you have somehow a management plan thought out. So work with the researchers and the experts, communicate with other land managers. Who has GSOB? Is it close to me? What are you doing? What worked? What didn't? Working with the UC, we are available for any consultation. What should I do here? Get an arborist to do your management, and make sure it includes monitoring, find and remove the brood trees. You manage the infested wood that comes out of those brood trees, do treatments if needed, and then make sure you communicate about what's going on, communicate with your community and let them know that your tree is infested, so your neighbor can have the choice of maybe protecting their tree. And make sure everyone else knows and is aware of this, and we all work together as a community. And we all work to prevent either getting the problem worse or moving the problem to another community. And as Mike said, Weir Canyon is a great case of a success story. So this is the last thing I wanted to share with you, just to show you that it can be done. So basically, they responded pretty quick. They first found it in 2014 and immediately started surveying the area and determining what kind of management are they going to do with it. They removed the amplifier trees. They were treating the infested trees and some buffer trees around the infested trees since 2015. They kept open collaboration and communication. They were consulting with us, with the UC, with Forest Service, CAL FIRE. They were sharing information with other land managers, you know, like OC Parks that are like the neighbors. In this case, we're talking about big land management. They just engaged the community in there, just also to make sure they could prevent any spread of this pest. And really, it worked. At this point, after several years of treatments, they went from in the first 2 years that they did the surveys, every year they had close to 300 infested trees and about 30 amplifier or brood trees that had to be removed. So the first 2 years, they removed close to 30 trees each year. And that was like 2015, 2016. Now in the last few surveys, the last 2 or 3 years of surveys, they've been finding only a dozen of infested trees, and each tree has 1 or 2 new holes, and that's it. They haven't found an amplifier tree in years. They've been finding very little infestation, and actually because the number of infested trees dropped so much, now they're working with us, UC, and with CAL FIRE to come up with, change the plan. Now they're not going to be treating all those trees every year. Now they're thinking, okay, now the infestation is so low, maybe we're going to only treat a few infested trees or a few locations and try to use less pesticides in the area because it's pretty well managed right now. So it is possible. We just have to take action. If you want to learn more, I recommend you to visit our website, gsob.org. There's information, there's training announcements, there's a reporting tool over here. If you have a tree that you suspect has GSOB. Right now, because there's so much going on in the canyons, you can contact Mike and get the 719 form that would allow us to go and survey your property. And then also on gsob.org, there's this story map that talks about GSOB management and firewood management. So it's a really good tool to explore and see with a little bit more detail about the different management options that you have. And of course, I'm always available. Here's my email, and you can contact me. You can contact me through Mike, but anytime you can get in touch with me, and I'll be happy to help with whatever I can. And with that, this is what I wanted to share with you. There's a few other things. I'm gonna stop my share so you can see you guys' faces. So in the canyons, as you know, or some of you know, we've been doing surveys in the private properties. There's funding. The Orange County Fire Authority has funding that comes from CAL FIRE that will allow us to go there. They're contracting us, UC, to go do the surveys. So for anybody who's interested in getting their oaks and also other trees surveyed, you can just contact Mike and let him know, hey, I really want to do this, or you can contact me if you forgot Mike's phone number or email, and I'll put you in touch with the right people to get. You just need to get a form signed that says, yes, I let them go in my house and look at my trees. And then Chris, who's in this talk, and Gabe, who's also part of my team, will go with Mike and survey your trees. We get an idea of what's going on. Then based on those results, I make management recommendations. And then as we can, as time and funds allow, we might be able even to remove amplifier trees or treat those trees through OCFA. And just signing that form doesn't mean that we can go and do whatever we want. It just means that we can go and look at your trees. They will tell you what we found. I can share the results. I can share the management recommendations, and then you can decide what you want to do. And if that coincides with our funding the timing, you might be able to get OCFA to do that, or you can say like, I want this, yes, not that, and we'll all work with that. So it will be really important if we can get as many properties as possible surveyed and get a very good notion of what's going on with GSOB in the canyons, because we know they're there. We want to know how bad it is and actually try to do something about it.
Okay, Beatriz, thank you. That was wonderful. So we're going to take questions now for a few minutes. Rich, you've got a hand raised.
I understand how devastating this beetle can be. I was very familiar with the San Diego area, both before and after, and it's devastating. And this is an emergency. Mary has for years put out the flyers and everything else. I've looked at these flyers, I've gone online, I've looked at the websites. But when Nikki posted her trees, I asked her if I could go up there and look and see what these beetle hole exits look like in person, so that I can protect my own trees. And I was shocked at how small these holes are. And the websites, the brochures, they don't give it justice at how small these are. And Mary's property and Nick is right next to Nikki, and her property is infested as well. And if it could happen to Mary, it could happen to any one of us. So this is going to take a complete community involvement to be able to stop this. If they did it in Weir Canyon, we can do it here. We love our oaks. It's nobody's fault. We just need to join together, and we need to stop this right now.
Okay, good point. And do we have some other questions or comments? I mean,
I see
I've
someone
got it.
hand
Go
up.
ahead.
Nina McDonald sits in the user.
Yeah, we were wondering, can you just say which canyons you found the GSOB in?
Modjeska, Silverado, and Trabuco. Right, Chris?
Yes, he's found in all of those.
Right,
Yeah.
so you said that there was this 5-mile limit. So if it's in Modjeska, then every tree in Modjeska is within 5 miles of it, and that's probably true in Silverado too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the idea of that is that if there's no GSOB 5 miles around your oak, you should not treat your oak. You
Right.
know, it's kind of like to make people not treat their oaks when they shouldn't. Since there is GSOB in the 3 canyons, it wouldn't be irresponsible to treat your oak. It wouldn't be necessarily necessary to treat your oak. We usually treat the oaks that are 300 feet, like at least less than 300 feet. I'm sorry, less than 300 feet from a known infested oak. So if you don't know, if there's no oaks so close to them, it could be fine. You know, you just have to keep monitoring.
Well, I just wonder, for example, we have a property with lots of oaks, but we have one oak that's, you know, sort of this centerpiece oak. And I'm just wondering if it would make sense to treat that, just because if we lost it, it would be a disaster.
Yeah, in that case, so that would be what we call a high value oak. And so if you have the means to do it, it would not be a bad idea to do it.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question for you on the disposal of infected wood. There's been, so if there's a tree that's infected, and it's cut down and there's all this wood and it needs to be chipped, could we not just take it to the local green waste recycling in Baker Canyon, which is right off of, I mean, what would that work?
Yes, you could. If you're chopping down that tree yourself, you could.
Yes.
You have to make sure to that that wood is flagged for fast chipping.
I
Especially if
see.
you do it during the summer. If you cut it now, you know, and it takes a few days for them to process it, you're probably okay because it's in the middle of it's the winter. But if not, you just have to make sure it goes into their treatment, you know, chipping and whatnot, pretty fast. If you are contracting someone to remove the tree, the easiest way is to include the chipping in the contract, and any
Gotcha.
arborist has chippers that will do that. Yeah.
Okay, good, thank you. Other questions? Yes, Mike.
Yes, I just wanted to say I talked with the owner of Baker Canyon Green Recycling in Aguanaga, Dan Dulac, and discussed the situation with him last week. And he said, bring it on. But I think it's a great idea to have it flagged, to let them know you're bringing that load in so that it gets through their grinder as quickly as possible.
Right.
Yeah,
But
and
he's willing to take it.
that's great. And they seem to chip pretty quick because I've been there 100 times, so they don't let it sit. Okay, any other questions before we move on?
Yeah,
Frances-
and there's a
Francesca.
couple of hands. There's Francesca and JJ Galvez too.
Yes.
Just to follow up on what Mike was saying, so the chipper days that we sponsor, ICL and Fire Safe Council, going together, and we ask the community to bring us their wood debris, their green waste, and we chip it, and then we take it to a disposal site. Once we go through the chipping process, I mean, we're not going to be able to vet all the wood, so we really don't know what people are bringing us. They're just bringing us wood. Once it's chipped, it is then safe to take to a green waste place, and we are not contributing to the spread. Is that correct?
If it's for GSOB, yes, once it's chipped less than 3 inches, that there's no way anything survived through that. So you can take it somewhere else, or you can just spread them in your property as well if you don't want to pay for the disposal of the chips, or use them as mulch. Yes, be careful with other species, because we know that in the canyons there's also invasive shot hole borers, which is a different invasive beetle. And that beetle needs the chips a lot smaller, and so it needs to be less than 1 inch, which is pretty hard to achieve. So that's a little bit more delicate in that case.
Okay, JJ.
Yeah, as a new neighbor, and maybe this is a question for the other neighbors, what's a good place to buy firewood that would be protected from infection?
That's a great question. I don't know. Does anyone have
Not
an
sure
answer?
if you guys, Mike had a lead on that. He shared that before. What I can tell you, I don't know where, but if you want it to be, make sure it's totally bug free, it has to be kiln dried, which is kind of hard to find lately. So at least wood that is from species that are not harboring bad pests. So I would not buy oak wood right now, especially in the canyons. Or make sure that it has been seasoned for at least 2 years. If the bark is coming off of the oak wood, then it's fine. Or if it's debarked. But Mike,
Debarked, yeah.
didn't you have like a location that you knew?
I spoke to Linda Peterson, owner of Specialized Tree Service here down at the mouth of Silverado Canyon, about this, and they guarantee that the wood that they have is not infested, and they have multiple certified arborists on site to check that kind of situation. So I would recommend buy it from ask where you buy it. Is this wood been inspected for GSOBs? And try and talk to one of their certified arborists first before you purchase it.
Okay.
And avoid oak. I will avoid
Yeah.
oak wood.
Yeah, okay. We've got a few more questions that came in via the chat line. We're gonna take those and then end the meeting because we're running out of time. I'll take the easy one first, which says, how do we get the Form 719 so we can have our trees looked at? That is on the Intercanyon League website now, so go to intercanyonleague.org. And where do you find it, Francesca? Exactly.
I just copied it into the link.
Okay, into which link?
It's on the home page. So if you go to, if you're the first page you go to, just scroll down, you'll see a picture of Jeff with
okay.
his guitar. And right next to it, I talk about the sample form 719. And there's a form that after you look at the sample that Mike filled out for us, I mean, don't make stupid mistakes, then you can fill out your own form. So you could just download it from right there. So go intercanyonleague.org and then scan down till you get to about mid-page, and that's where the links are.
And Celeste just stuck it in the chat box. How far, this is back to Beatriz, how far does a stream have to be so that you cannot spray? So spraying around streams.
Yes, so I'll say if it's less than 100 feet from water, you should not be spraying. And then there's several considerations. If there's a slope, we want to be far enough away that any drift from the spray doesn't make it into the water. So I'll say it has to be at least 100 feet from the water with no slope. When you have slope, depending on how steep the slope is, I would just add another 100 feet probably.
Okay, well, we're out of time, so
Let me just add one thing, Jeff.
Yes,
All those
yes.
Form 719s are coming to me because the man in charge, Scott Hatch at the Orange County Fire Authority, is swamped. He's got 12 programs countywide. And so it's my job to help with the coordinating all of this, the surveys and the follow-up treatments here in the canyon.
Okay, and that's super. And on the form, do we know how to get in touch with you?
Oh, it says right there to send it to the PO box for the Fire Safe Council. I'm the one that picks up the mail.
Okay, super. And thanks, Mike. You've been terrific.
I've been working on this project with the Orange County Fire Authority for 2+ years now. I had a $500 million budget for the Fire Safe Council for dead and dying trees, and that one's over with. This particular grant has been extended from March of 2022 to March of 2025. Good news.
Okay, no, that's good. All right, so we got, Mike, if you'll take a look at the chat, because there's some questions that you might be able to answer.
If you hadn't filled last year, you might have to fill it again because it has a certain, it gets, it expires.
Okay.
So, and if we checked your property last year, it can't hurt just to get another 719 form. So we're all good to go.
During the change in management, some of the paperwork was lost at the Orange County Fire Authority. So even if you filled one out before and send it to me, send it again. And you can also email them to me.
That's right. And Holy Jim Canyon, have you looked at trees in Holy Jim Canyon?
I've been talking to the president of the Homeowners Association up in Holy Jim, and she's got a line. She's dealing with a district ranger, Vance, in the Corona offices. And I'm also trying to bring some other federal agencies to bear on the situation so that we have a memorandum of understanding between the feds and the state of California signed in 2020 to work together to implement programs that will avoid future major fires like we're having in California these days.
Okay, we're going to end it.
Bring the feds in.
All right, we're going to end this discussion Beatriz, that was fabulous. Everyone should give her some applause. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
This meeting, this part of the meeting has been recorded. I will get it out in a few days and post it out to YouTube and send another message around so people who haven't seen it can take a look. I thought it was extremely informative and really very positive. I don't feel so discouraged as I did 5 years ago or 6 years ago when we first did it. So thanks so much.
Remember Ware Canyon, folks.
Yeah.
We've been highly successful treating this pest in Ware Canyon.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so that's going to end this. I'm going to stop recording if I can figure out how to do that. Okay.
I left my email on the chat if anybody missed it and still need